following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
This Social Security measure gives at least some protection
for anybody to hand this out. We're asking for a chance to have the people who will receive the benefit to earn their way. The same principle established under the Social Security system in this area.
It is no longer acceptable to discuss women's rights as separate from human rights.
I know we can come together to face down the challenges of our own time.
Welcome to Us Democrats. My name is Dave Tenza, chair of the Nashua Democratic City Committee. We're very excited today to have with us Jennifer Dollar, a candidate for executive councilor, Democratic candidate for executive councilor here in Executive Council District 5. Jennifer, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you on the show so you can introduce yourself to voters here in Nashua and throughout the district. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, I started out my career in radio, actually.
You did?
Yeah, I worked in radio until I had my first child.
Okay.
And then I devoted myself to raising children for a long time. I have two sons, 22 and 20, and a daughter who's 13. And one of my sons experiences a disability in his life, so that takes a lot of extra parenting and guidance and things. So I spent a long time at home with children, but doing a lot of volunteer work and other little things in the community. So I did a master's of education during that time.
Okay. And let me back up. Let me ask you, you raised your children here in New Hampshire?
Yes, for the most part. That's where I've done the balance of my children have grown up here.
Okay.
One was born here, and two were born in New York.
Okay, great. And you live, since you lived in New Hampshire, you've always lived in Temple?
Well, when we first came to New Hampshire, we were in Wilton for a little while. Then we went to Greenfield. Then we were in Peterborough, and we've been in Temple since 2002. So that's been the longest stretch.
Great. And you said you have 3 children. So what did you do in radio before?
I was mostly a technician.
Oh, wow.
Did a lot of music recording and things like that, freelance. So it's good.
And you said that you've done a lot of volunteer work while your kids were growing up. What kind of things have you been involved in?
Oh, I've been involved in the church and political things. In 2004, the Temple Democrats started out of the group supporting Governor Dean in his bid for the presidency. So worked on a lot of campaigns and very active in the Temple Democrats picnic and all those fun things that we do.
There are a lot of Democrats out in Temple? Pretty
There's
active
some.
group,
I mean,
sure.
Temple is, I think it's pretty down the middle as far as registrations go.
Sure.
But we have a good presence there. And there's lively debates happening at the Temple store and around the town as everywhere else.
Yeah, and that's great. And I know the Hillsborough County Democrats, the group that oversees, we'll say, organizing Democrats in all the towns. They do a great job. Graham Smith out there from Amherst and Milford.
Right.
It's a very active group of Democrats in the town, in all the towns, which
it's true.
is a good sign for Democrats in New Hampshire, definitely in Hillsborough County.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about your political experience, because this isn't the first time you've run for office.
This is not the first time I've run for office. I was asked to run for office in 2006 by then Representative Linda Foster of Mount Vernon, who went on to become Deputy Speaker. And I had no political experience as far as running for office, but I thought, oh, that's something I would like to do. So I did, and we campaigned, and that was a big year for Democrats. As you know, it was the first time Democrats controlled the House, I believe, almost a century, I think 84 years or so. And so it was a very amazing and wonderful time to be a Democratic legislator in New Hampshire, to have the majority for the first time in that long a period.
Sure.
And I have to say that I was very impressed with the leadership. I was very impressed with Terry Norelli, who became Speaker. She was originally running for Majority Leader, and she became Speaker, and Representative Foster became Deputy Speaker, and they chose a wonderful leadership team of great chairs and people who really knew how to run things and how to make things work well without having any institutional memory, because it's very different to be in the minority than the majority. I've served in both in the House, so and it was a wonderful training ground and mentoring and working with amazing people, such as Representative Rosenwald. She was the committee chair, Health and Human Services and Elderly Affairs, and she did a great job and made sure that all the freshmen on the committee had a chance to speak on the floor and had a chance to chair subcommittees and really learn the ropes.
Oh, great. And so what issues were you involved with in your time as a legislator?
Well, on Health and Human Services and Elderly Affairs, one of the things that we did that I was very proud of was we ended the waiting list for people with developmental disabilities who age out of the school system to receive services. There had been a lag of time for some people because the federal law says that people have to have services till the age of 21, but then after 21, more of it falls on the state laws and state rules. And so there was a waiting list, and we ended that in 2007, and it was a vote in the House of 300 to 5 to end that list. So it was a totally bipartisan effort.
Wow.
And that was a really nice thing to be a part of. And then there are a lot of things that aren't in the more detail-oriented bills that sometimes people come in and say something's a housekeeping bill, which seems that it's just a little thing, but sometimes they can get more complicated than you think.
Sure.
And they're not things that are very big or wind up in the newspaper, but just things to update policies and keep things moving forward.
Sure, great. And so you served in the House from 2006 until
2008.
Okay, and then you were back again.
Yes, and then in 2010, we know what happened, that the House and the Senate and the Executive Council went Republican by very large margins, 3-to-1 margin, veto-proof majorities, and also 5-0 in the Executive Council.
Right.
So when it was Organization Day, when they had those majorities and Bill O'Brien was elected Speaker, I was up in the gallery and I saw the little group of Democrats down on the floor. And I thought to myself, you know, I really want to be there. I really feel like I belong with them now that it's so tough. And then Bob Meade, who had won a seat, became Speaker O'Brien's chief of staff. So there was a special election, and I was in the same district with them. And there was a special election announced to fill the seat because he resigned, I think, the day after Organization Day. So I talked to the other people that it was usually, there was a multi-seat district and you run as a team. So we spoke about it and we all decided that I should run for that seat. And I did, and it was, you know, I campaigned pretty hard for it, but we had done a lot of groundwork.
Sure.
Running for the 2010 election. We knocked on many doors and spoke to many people. So there was a lot of groundwork already done. And then in May, there was the special election took place, and I won every town. So that was a good sort of referendum on what was going on in the House at the time, which many people thought was too extreme.
Right, and that's you know, certainly looking back at it now, as Democrats back then, we knew it was extreme, and it's amazing to me reading the newspaper now and seeing how some of the local elected officials, elected Republicans, are campaigning. They're looking to bring the state right back there if they get back in the majority. All those bills that we thought were crazy back in 2010, they want to bring right back up. So we're obviously working hard at every level here in Nashua and across the state to hopefully make sure that doesn't happen. there's some level of moderation that takes place in this election once again.
Yeah.
What now? Because you said you were there in both while you were in the majority, and I mean, when you say minority, there, it's one thing to be a minority where it's 225 Republicans to 175 Democrats, but there were 300 Republicans to about 100 Democrats, so you really had no even leverage or power or anything.
Right. We did stop some things, though, such as the what they term the Right to Work bill, which people also call the Right to Work for Less bill, which is basically a union-busting bill. And with some Republican allies, some of whom paid for that, we were able to, it passed the House and the Senate, but the governor vetoed it, and we were able to sustain that veto instead of override it, where many of Governor Lynch's vetoes were overridden during that time. And so even just to be there to prevent that from happening, and also to give voice to our values and our side of things. It's still important, even when it's not prevailing, because you're always planting the seed then for something better to happen in the future.
Right.
So
absolutely,
even defeat might look like it, but there's always, if one speaks out and stays true to representing the people who sent you there, as in the case of the special election, they knew who I am and who they were voting for, so I felt as okay, their voice needs to be heard, even if it doesn't prevail this time.
Sure.
So.
And that's, I mean, it was a significant election for you in your district, especially since it was just you on the ballot, and really, with the special election, people had to come out and vote.
Yeah, there was a higher turnout for that than usual in special elections, too. I think people did have a certain amount of buyer's remorse with what had happened. Sometimes it can get where people can be, because they're frustrated with what's going on, that they think, oh, we're going to clean house, we're going to get rid of everybody and bring in all new people, which sounds good on the surface, but you always have to look at who you're voting for, because just because somebody's been in office a long time doesn't necessarily make them a bad legislator. In a lot of ways, it makes them a better legislator, and everything else. The more you do something, the better you get at it.
Sure.
And sometimes new blood can be good too. Yeah. But always really look at who you're voting for. That's important.
Sure. What would you say the biggest thing you learned going back, being in the minority? What's the biggest thing that?
That I'm tough. It was very difficult because, as you said, it wasn't the same as previous minorities had been, or how it had been for Democrats under previous Republican majorities and Republican speakers. It was a hyper-partisan atmosphere. There was a lot of incivility. There was almost a disregard at times for minority positions, which hadn't been the case. I'd been told, because as I said, I had only served in a Democratic majority previously. Sure. So when things can be that way, you can grow a thicker skin, which isn't always a bad thing.
No, it's not. It's not. It's important to get tough. Tough sometimes, absolutely. So how did you come to the decision that you were going to run for the executive councilor seat?
Well, I guess the seed for that was also planted in that time because, of course, we were having our issues in the House and Senate, especially the House. And I was seeing also about what the all-Republican Executive Council was doing, especially with the Planned Parenthood contracts and the rail study funding and different things that they were holding up because they had their ideology instead of the state's benefit in their mind. And I think that it's very important to keep a Democratic majority on the Executive Council, especially with a Democratic governor, if we want to see progress being made. So you know, the redistricting happened under Republican majorities as well, so that was also to their advantage. And they did change this district a bit and took Keene out and some of the other towns there that they were trying to make it more Republican, but when Councilor Pignatelli ran in 2012, she was able to win the seat. And when she announced her retirement, I thought to myself, you know, this seat is very important. It's a swing district. It's pretty much even as far as percentages go. So I thought, you know, if I want to make sure this seat stays Democratic, I think I should put my hat in the ring and run for it myself. So. Well,
great. And you've been campaigning for a couple months now, all throughout the district. You know, has anything surprised you in talking to voters, or the people saying exactly what you expect them to say about the elections coming up in November?
Well, some people aren't tracking that yet. So I have a primary. So my first election's actually in September.
Yes.
So for that, you know, summer really isn't too early to be campaigning. But for many people, you know, it is still summertime, and they're not really thinking of elections. Some of us are always thinking of elections or the next steps. But I have been well received, and I've been talking to many voters, and I've been hearing stories that people have been telling, especially about health care, you know, how it's helped them to have, you know, the Affordable Care Act. A friend told me about a friend of hers who was diagnosed with a certain type of cancer, and she would not have gone to the doctor or gone for treatment if there hadn't been the Affordable Care Act and her getting insurance, because she hadn't had it previously. But, you know, a lot of people don't realize that many people around won't go and seek out medical care if they know they can't pay for it. I mean, most places do. I mean, most hospitals will work out payment plans, and they will. There is some charity care, but a lot of people have a lot of pride, and they just won't go. And there was a young man in my town who died of a treatable condition at 29 because he wouldn't go because he was afraid of the bills and afraid of what, you know, of that. And so, you know, that sticks in my mind. I was also talking to some voters around who were working for the hospitals. And one of the things that the Republicans did in their budget was there was a tax called the Medicaid Enhancement Tax that was actually put into place by a Republican administration back in the early 90s, I believe, where the hospitals paid a tax and then the money went back to help them offset the uncompensated care.
Sure.
And what happened was the O'Brien House just put that money in the general fund and didn't return it to the hospitals, and that caused them to have to make many layoffs. And it also caused people who had pensions and different things that they were counting on, those benefits also had to be cut because the hospitals wouldn't be able to keep the people on with that funding being cut. So these things really affect people, and the effects ripple on into the future sometimes.
Sure, and certainly hospital bills. My family's we're lucky enough to have insurance, but when you get the statement from the insurance company showing how much they paid out for some pretty routine procedures, it is daunting. I can understand why, and certainly the Executive Council now, with everything that's going on with Medicaid expansion and the how it's somewhat up in the air with the differing opinions that are coming out through the courts, and the Executive Council could play potentially a huge role in whether Medicaid expansion even continues here.
Exactly, and that's why it's so vital. And I think that the governor has done a great job in being able to mediate things with the hospitals to come to a settlement about that, so that neither the hospitals nor the state continue to suffer and can have they negotiated the settlement, which was really good. And also, yeah, with Medicaid expansion, if the executive council falls to people, again, like it did in 2010, to people who don't like the federal government,
Right.
won't take federal money. It's not only that, but a lot of other things can be put in jeopardy that we're moving forward on. That would be a shame. Also, yeah.
You know, it amazed me, and still does, the Republicans who won't take the federal money because, you know, we know that New Hampshire pays more into the federal government than we get back. Whereas we pay in, or we get back 80 cents for every dollar we put in or something. So it's not even like we're taking anything that we haven't already put into the federal coffers.
Exactly.
They're literally just giving us our money back to spend in a way to help other people in New Hampshire. So it would be difficult, unfortunately, and unfortunately they're putting their ideology in front of the well-being of a lot of people. But tell me this: what we only have a couple minutes left here, but what are your priorities if you were to be elected to the Executive Council? What issues would you really push for District 5?
Well, I would continue Councillor Pignatelli's values of, you know, transparency, accountability, fairness, making sure that the policies, you know, set forth by the legislature and the governor are carried out, and that we do keep our federal funds flowing in to have certain programs that we need. I mean, I was just my thought from before was that we're going to go now from only having one insurance company on the exchange to having more.
Right.
And that will increase competition and make the Affordable Care Act work better for New Hampshire. Whereas before, when it was up in the air and companies didn't know whether the state was going to stymie it or work with it, they were cautious to come into the market. And now we have more companies coming into the market and everything will work better. So healthcare is also a priority. Transit, the rail, the corridor is also a priority. I spent last summer commuting from Exit 8 on the bus to Boston. And, you know, it's a really great service, but I think having rail will also help tie the different communities together and have more lead to economic growth.
Sure.
For the southern part of the state where we are.
Sure, and absolutely, obviously, well, everyone's identified rail as the kind of number one economic issue in Nashua here, and a lot of people are excited. I think we all believe that it's going to be here someday, but clearly we need people on the Executive Council to support that and to push that, to make that happen. Is there anything else that you would like voters to know about you as they make their decision, Democratic voters, for the primary?
I am a Democrat and a proud Democrat, and I've been a Democrat for a long time, but I'm also about civility and about working together. I feel like the best solutions come when many stakeholders and many people share their viewpoints and come to a compromise. After being in the House under former Speaker O'Brien, I could see what happens when that doesn't happen.
Sure.
And it's not anything that leads to good policy, and it's not anything that really helps people. Also, a part of the job that I really would look forward to is constituent services. I really enjoyed that, being a state rep, that somebody could call me with a problem with one of the departments or some issue, and that I could help them with that. And I think that's also an important part of what the executive counselor does, is being an advocate for all the constituents of the executive council district. So I find that interesting, and it always makes me feel good if I can help people. So.
Absolutely, and certainly Councillor Pignatelli, that's one of the things she's known for.
Yes.
More people than you can think of sing her praises when it comes to help they needed.
Exactly.
That with state government and so many different types of people too, and different problems that they have. She's been terrific about that. So
Yeah, that's an important part. When it comes to the Executive Council too, I tell people it's the most important part of state government that you might not have heard of.
right.
Because New Hampshire is unique in that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. If people want to find out more information about you or get in contact with you, how would they do that? Do you have a website, a Facebook page you'd like to?
I do have a website, and they can like my Facebook page and get updates. And through my website, they can sign up. I do email updates on my campaign.
Okay.
And that will switch, should I be elected, that will switch into updates for what's going on in the Executive Council. Councilor Pignatelli also does email updates, which many people find very helpful, because it is important for people to know what's going on in state government.
I mean, I think it's especially so much of the policy, if not all of the policy, flows through the Executive Council now with the $10,000 threshold to approve contracts. I mean, that's not a lot of money. So
Right. So that's most of the contracts
right,
that the
most of
state
the
enters into.
not a lot of money, but it also, if you have the wrong people in there, as we saw, things can get jammed up
Exactly.
pretty quickly.
Or politicized, things get politicized that didn't need to be politicized. The whole thing with the Planned Parenthood contracts just did not need to be politicized. They were providing the best and most cost-effective health care, and that's why they got the contract. Not,
Right.
and just saying because you don't like Planned Parenthood, because you don't like them, is not good policy.
Right. And it's disheartening to see too these national issues play out here on the local level, because I don't think New Hampshire is a state where that needs to happen. I mean, we're a small enough state where we should be able to work together and get things done for people.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Jennifer, thank you so much. And again, the date of the primary?
It's Tuesday, September 9th, and I urge everybody to go out and vote. It's really important to vote in the primary and get the nominee settled for the general election. So.
Absolutely. And so Tuesday, September 9th, and it's important for Democrats to get out and vote in the primary, and then just also go out and vote for people who are in non-contested elections like Senator Shaheen and Governor Hassan.
Exactly.
To show that we are all united behind them. Well, we are actually out of time. Thank you so much for coming here today and talking with us. For us Democrats, I'm Dave Tenza. Thanks for joining us.
This Social Security measure gives at least some protection.
For anybody to hand this out, we're asking for a chance to have the people who will receive the benefit to earn their way. The same principle established under the Social Security system in this union.
It is no longer acceptable to discuss women's rights as separate from human rights.
I know we can come together to face down the challenges of our own time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.